Hello, dear listener. I'm glad you're here. Make yourself comfortable. Let your shoulders soften, your jaw unclench, and your breathing find an easy rhythm. There's nowhere you need to be except right here, and nothing you need to do except let this night carry you gently. If you'd like, imagine the room around you growing a little quieter, the edges of the day dimming like a lamp turned low. Tonight's story is calm, cozy, and safe. An autumn walk through a quiet town where the streetlights glow through mist, and the streets seem to breathe in time with you. Settle in and take your time. He stepped out into the night as if into a familiar coat, one that always fit, even when the day had been long. The door closed behind him with a soft, respectful click, and the sound seemed to fold neatly into the hush around it. Above the eaves, the sky was the deep, velvety kind of dark that comes in late autumn, when the clouds hold the city's last scraps of warmth close and refuse to let the stars show off too much. It was not a heavy darkness, not a lonely one more like a blanket pulled up carefully to the chin. The air was cool and damp in that gentle way that never shocks, just reminds you that you're alive. A thin mist drifted through the street like pale breath. Morose? No. It was the kind of mist that softened every edge without hiding anything important. The kind that made the world look kinder by turning harsh lines into rounded ones. It carried the scent of wet stone and fallen leaves, and the faint mineral tang that always came after rain, as if the earth had washed its hands and was now resting. He took a slow breath in through his nose. The smell of rain was there, clean and honest, mixed with something faintly woody. Perhaps the soaked bark of trees along the avenue, perhaps the damp benches in the little square, perhaps the memory of gardens gone quiet for the season. His exhale drifted in front of him as a pale blur, quickly swallowed by the mist. He adjusted his scarf, bringing the warmth of it closer to his throat. It was a thick scarf, the kind you could bury your face in for a second and feel instantly steadier. The fabric held a touch of heat from where it had been wrapped around him all evening, and it still carried a hint of laundry soap and wool, a clean, comforting smell that belonged to home. He pressed his chin down into it, and the world narrowed to the warmth at his neck, the coolness at his cheeks, and the softness of the night around him. He had spent a calm evening, quiet conversation, warm tea, the low murmur of music in the background. kind of laughter that doesn't demand anything from you. He left with gratitude sitting evenly in his chest, not loud, not sparkly, just present. The kind of gratitude that feels like a steady hand at your back. Not excitement, not relief, simply contentment, balanced and smooth, like a lake after the last ripple fades. Now he walked home. The town was small enough to know him, and old enough to be unhurried. It did not posture or rush. It did not bristle with too many lights or shout with neon. It was a place of modest windows and familiar corners, where streets curved around gardens and squares, the way thoughts curve around memories. At night, in autumn, it became even more itself quiet, gently luminous and patient. The first street lamp he passed stood in a halo of fog. The light it cast was a soft amber circle, like honey stirred into water. On the wet cobblestones, the glow became a second lamp, laid flat across the ground, shimmering, broken into tiny reflections by the uneven stone. The cobbles were dark with rain, and every stone held a little shine along its rounded top. His shoes made a muted sound as he walked, a careful, damp tap that never echoed harshly. Each step was answered by the next, and the rhythm felt as natural as breathing. He listened to those steps for a moment. The town had quiet streets, but not empty ones. Quiet is different from empty. In the distance, somewhere beyond the mist, there was the faintest suggestion of life. A door closing, a far-off engine idling, and then fading, the murmur of a television behind a curtained window. Nothing urgent, nothing demanding, just small proofs that other people were also living their nights gently. On his left, a row of shops had long since turned off their bright interior lights, but their windows still offered a kind of calm display, not flashy, not seductive, just tidy arrangements. A bookstore with stacks of paperbacks and hardcovers laid in neat towers, their covers turned outward as if they were quietly introducing themselves. A baker's window with baskets that had been emptied earlier, now holding only the comforting smell of bread that seemed to cling to the wood. A small shop that sold scarves and gloves, its mannequin wearing a coat the color of roasted chestnuts. Each window was a little stage lit from within, but in the softened way of after hours, lamps left on at the back, a warm bulb above a counter, a dim glow behind frosted glass. It felt like the town's way of leaving a nightlight for itself. he walked slowly, not because he was tired, but because there was no need to hurry. The mist made distance feel gentle and close. The next street lamp was only a few paces ahead, and beyond it another, and beyond that another, each one a calm island. He moved from circle to circle of light, as if stepping through a series of quiet rooms. Each time he entered a new halo, his scarf seemed a little warmer, his thoughts a little smoother, as if the light itself encouraged him to slow down and be present. He found himself noticing small things. The way a wet leaf stuck to the edge of a stone and trembled slightly when a breeze passed. The tiny streams of water that ran between the cobbles, gathering into faint silver threads. The way the mist thickened near the ground, like a shy animal settling in. There was a comfort in noticing, in letting his mind rest on details that asked nothing from him. A thin drizzle began, not enough to be called rain, more like the sky's quiet afterthought. It landed on his coat as a cool, fine speckling that didn't soak so much as remind. The droplets made the streetlights sparkle in little bursts, as if the air itself had tiny points of light suspended in it. He pulled his scarf a touch higher and smiled without meaning to. The night had that particular autumn mood, damp and soft, with a kindness in its coolness. The drizzle did not threaten. It only accompanied. As he passed the corner where the street widened into a small square, he heard a distant chime, soft and measured, like a spoon stirring in a porcelain cup. Then another. It took him a moment to place it. A bell somewhere far off, perhaps from the old clock tower near the river, or the small church tucked behind the trees. The sound traveled through mist in a special way, arriving with rounded edges, like something wrapped in wool. It did not startle him. It simply existed, a gentle marker of time that didn't hurry anyone. He paused for half a beat under a lamp and let the bell's last note fade. The town felt like it was listening, too. The houses, the cobblestones, the trees with their thinning crowns of leaves, everything seemed attentive, not in a watchful way, but in a restful one, like a room that grows quiet when someone begins to read aloud. He continued on, his pace unbroken, his breathing even. He inhaled again, and the rain scent had grown a touch stronger. It mingled now with the smell of something faintly sweet from a bakery vent, and with the cold, green smell of damp ivy climbing a wall. He knew these scents the way you know an old song, without thinking, without effort. They belonged here. He took a turn into a narrower lane, one that ran between older buildings whose walls were textured with time. The stones were darker here, their surfaces shining in the lamplight. The windows were close to the street, and some were curtained with thick fabric that looked soft even from outside. Here and there, a plant sat on a sill, geraniums long past their summer bloom, but still kept like beloved pets, their leaves catching droplets. The lane smelled of wet masonry and a faint, clean soap scent drifting from somewhere, like someone had washed dishes and left them to dry. His footsteps sounded different in this lane. The walls made the sound slightly more intimate, a gentle hush-hush as rubber met wet stone. Even that was comforting, the sense of being held, of walking through a place that had known countless other footsteps and still welcomed each new one. He remembered briefly walking this same lane in other seasons. In spring, it would have smelled of damp earth waking up, of blossoms and new paint. In summer, the stones would have held warmth into the late hours. Tonight, in autumn, the stones held coolness and rain, and the quiet satisfaction of a day finished well. The mist deepened as he approached the river district. It always did, drawn there by the water. The river itself was not visible yet, but he could sense it in the air, an added smoothness, a subtle chill, the faint sound of moving water that was more felt than heard. The town's lamps grew a little more spaced here, and between them the darkness was soft and deep. He liked this part of town at night. In daylight it bustled, people crossing the bridge, bicycles clicking, small boats tied along the banks. But at night it became a place of gentle reflection, literally and otherwise. When the river was calm, it mirrored the lamps like a ribbon of melted gold. When it moved with autumn's rain, it carried the reflections in stretched, trembling lines. Either way, it held the light kindly. As he came closer, the distant bell returned, fainter now, and was joined by another sound, a thin, bright note that seemed to come from far away. It might have been a wind chime on someone's porch, or a buoy's bell near the river, or simply the town's own way of singing softly to itself. It drifted through the mist and then disappeared, leaving the quiet even deeper. He crossed a small bridge with a railing slick from drizzle. The wood under his hand felt cold when he touched it briefly, but not unpleasant. He liked the feel of the world's textures at night, the contrast between warm scarf and cold air, between dry wool and damp stone, between the softness of mist and the solid certainty of the ground. On the bridge he slowed. The river below was dark, but the street lamp at the far end cast a wide glow across the water. In that glow, the drizzle became visible as delicate threads, falling in diagonal lines. The water received them without complaint, without splash loud enough to hear. The river's surface quivered, and the lamp's reflection shivered with it, as if the light were breathing. He leaned slightly over the railing, not to look for anything specific, but to be with the moment. It was easy in a night like this to feel as if the town was not merely built, but alive in a gentle, steady way. Not alive like a creature that might startle or change suddenly. Alive like a hearth that keeps warmth even when no one stares at it. Alive like a familiar song, humming quietly in the background of your thoughts. There was a kind of presence in the town's quietness, a benevolent presence, patient and unhurried. He did not need to name it. It did not ask for belief. It was simply there, in the way the lamps held their halos, in the way the mist moved slowly without urgency, in the way the cobblestones shone as if they had been polished for his walk home. He pushed away from the railing and continued, crossing off the bridge and onto the riverside path. Here the cobblestones gave way to smoother stones, and then to packed earth. The drizzle made the path darker, and a thin line of water ran along its edge. The leaves from the river trees had fallen in layers, and the path was sprinkled with them, slick and shining. He stepped carefully, but without fear. His body knew how to balance. The night was kind. A bench sat under a tree, its wooden slats darkened by rain. The bench looked like it had been waiting, not for anyone in particular, but for the idea of rest. In the mist, it felt like a gentle suggestion. If you ever want to sit, you can. The town always had places to pause. Across the river, the outlines of buildings were softened to silhouettes. A few windows glowed warmly, small squares of amber or pale gold. They looked like candles in paper lanterns. He imagined the people inside, someone reading, someone washing a mug, someone pulling a blanket over their knees. Ordinary lives wrapped in ordinary warmth. The thought made him feel even more grateful, the way one does when remembering that comfort exists in many places at once. He passed a little kiosk that sold newspapers and postcards during the day. At night, its metal shutter was down, and a faint reflection of a street lamp ran along its surface like a ribbon. The kiosk had a poster frame on the side, and inside it was a slightly weathered advertisement for a concert that had happened weeks ago. The paper was damp at the corners, but the image still smiled. The town carried its memories without fuss. The drizzle eased, and the mist grew thicker, as if the two had traded places. The air felt like cool silk. The light from the lamps diffused even more, creating a dreamy, painterly atmosphere. Every lamp was now a small sun behind gauze. He realized his shoulders had dropped. His hands, tucked in his coat pockets, were relaxed. His jaw was unclenched. He was not rehearsing tomorrow or reviewing today. He was simply walking, and the walking was enough. He turned away from the river and back into the residential streets. These were the streets he knew best. The houses here had small gardens, many of them now resting for the season. The last flowers had faded, but shrubs and evergreens remained, dark and glossy with rain. A few pumpkins still sat on porches, their faces uncarved, just round and sturdy, like quiet companions. Some doorsteps held doormats that looked heavier with water, and above them, porch lights glowed with a softer, more intimate hue than the street lamps. The mist made each porch light look like it had a gentle aura. It was impossible, in such light, to see anything as harsh. Even the shadows seemed friendly, simply places where light wasn't, not places where anything hid. He walked past a window where a lamp inside lit a small table. On the table sat a vase and a book, and the scene looked so peaceful that it felt like a tiny painting. He did not linger. There was a respectful boundary between his walk and other people's evenings, but the image stayed with him like a comforting note. Farther along, a cat sat on a low wall, its fur a dark shape against the damp stone. It watched him with calm eyes, not startled, not tense. When he passed, it blinked slowly, and the blink felt like a greeting. He nodded slightly as if returning it. In a town like this, even small exchanges felt gentle and natural. The street tilted upward just a little, and his steps adjusted. He felt the mild pull in his calves, the simple confirmation that he was moving. The wet cobblestones glimmered under the lamps, and his reflection stretched beneath him, a soft shadow with a halo at its edges where the light met mist. The world looked like it had been softened by an artist's thumb. He passed a small park enclosed by a low iron fence. The gate was open as it always was, and the path inside was lined with lamps on short posts. Those lamps were dimmer than the streetlights, but their light gathered on the wet path in cozy ovals. The trees in the park were mostly bare now, their branches drawn in delicate lines against the fog. A few leaves still clung, shining like bronze coins. He decided to walk through the park, not because it was shorter, but because it felt right. The park was a quiet heart in the town, a place where daytime laughter and nighttime peace both belonged. Inside the gate, the sounds changed. The world became a little more muffled, as if the grass and fallen leaves absorbed everything. His footsteps on the path were softer, and the distant sounds of the town became even more distant. The park smelled of wet earth and decomposing leaves, a rich, dark smell that spoke of cycles and rest. It was the scent of things returning to the ground, not in a sad way, but in a natural one, like exhaling after a long day. He walked beneath the trees, and the mist seemed to hang between branches like delicate fabric. Occasionally, a droplet would fall from a twig and land with a tiny, nearly inaudible pat on the path. He listened for it, not because he needed to, but because listening felt like another form of slowing down. In the center of the park was a small fountain, turned off for the season. Its stone basin held rainwater now, and the surface was dotted with leaves. The nearest lamp made the water shine faintly, and the leaves floating there looked like little boats. The fountain's statue, a simple figure with a bowl, was dark with moisture, and the mist wrapped it in softness. It looked less like a monument and more like a gentle guardian of the park's quiet. He paused by the fountain. In the lamplight and fog, the scene had a mild magic to it, not the kind that promises surprises, but the kind that makes ordinary things look tender. He felt again that kindly presence in the town, a sense that the place itself was aware of its own calm and was offering it freely. He thought of all the small, quiet acts that made a town like this. Someone sweeping a doorstep, someone putting a plant in a window, someone repairing a lamp so it would glow reliably in mist. None of it dramatic, all of it steady. The result was this feeling, this safe softness on a wet autumn night. A distant chime drifted in again, clearer now. It might have been the clock tower striking another quarter hour, or a bell on a bicycle as someone crossed a far street. The sound was gentle and thin, like a line drawn in the air. It faded quickly, leaving behind the sense that time was passing kindly, without pressing. He resumed his walk. The park path curved, and the lamps guided him like calm companions. Each pool of light appeared, grew, and then slid behind him. The mist made the transitions smooth, like turning pages. At the far end of the park, the gate opened onto a street lined with older homes. Here the cobblestones returned, and the houses had stoops and small iron railings. Ivy climbed some walls, its leaves glossy with moisture. A few wreaths hung on doors, simple autumn wreaths made of dried leaves and twigs, now darkened by drizzle, but still shaped with care. He passed one house where a porch swing moved slightly, pushed by the faint breeze. It creaked once, softly, and then settled. The sound did not startle. It felt like the house sighing contentedly, adjusting its weight. He walked on. His gratitude remained, steady as a candle flame in a calm room. He felt grateful for the evening he'd had, for the softness of the night, for the warmth of his scarf. Grateful, too, for his own quiet mind, for the simple ability to walk home and notice the world without feeling chased by it. The drizzle returned briefly, a light brushing on his coat. It did not penetrate. The fabric repelled it in tiny beads that caught the lamplight. He watched one bead roll along a seam and then drop, joining the dark ground. Such a small event, yet it felt satisfying, like watching a pebble settle at the bottom of a stream. He reached a familiar intersection where the streetlights were arranged in a way he'd always liked. Two on either side, their halos overlapping to make an extra bright patch on the cobbles. In that overlap, the stones looked almost golden, and the wetness made them gleam as if each cobble contained a hidden lamp of its own. He stepped into that brightness and felt, for a moment, as if the town had offered him a spotlight not to be seen, but to be warmly held. On the corner was a small cafe, closed now. Its chairs were stacked inside, and a chalkboard sign leaned against the wall, the writing blurred by moisture. The cafe's window had a string of tiny lights along the top, unnecessary, perhaps, charming. They were dimmed for the night, yet each bulb still glowed faintly, making a dotted line of warmth. The mist made the tiny lights look like fireflies frozen in place. The cafe always smelled of coffee and cinnamon during the day. Tonight, even with its door closed, he caught a trace of that scent as he walked past, maybe from the fabric awning, maybe from the memory of countless mornings. It mixed with the rain smell and became something uniquely comforting. The scent of a town that knew how to care for people. He turned onto the street that led toward his home. This street climbed gently and then leveled out. It was narrower than the main road, and the lamps were slightly older, their glass panes faintly fogged with condensation. The glow they cast was softer, and the mist made it spread like ink in water. He knew every feature here. The uneven cobble near the drain he always stepped over, the low wall with the chipped corner, the gate that squeaked if you touched it. Familiarity was a kind of softness too. It allowed his mind to relax completely, because nothing here demanded problem solving or vigilance. His body moved almost on its own, guided by memory and habit. As he walked, he noticed the way the town's sounds were arranged like a gentle composition. Near his feet, the soft tap of steps. Above, the quiet hiss of drizzle and the occasional drop from a gutter. Farther away, the distant bell, now silent, but leaving the impression it could return at any time. And beneath it all, a steady hush that wasn't emptiness, but calm. There was a particular corner where a street lamp stood beside a small tree. In summer, the tree's leaves would have turned the lamps light greenish, filtered through foliage. Now, with most leaves gone, the light fell more directly, illuminating the tree's thin branches like delicate lines drawn in gold. The remaining leaves, only a handful, glowed amber and copper as if they were lit from within. The mist swirled around the lamp and tree together, and the scene looked like a quiet blessing. He slowed there, just enough to take it in. The beauty was simple, but it felt significant, the way a perfectly placed word can feel significant. He thought of how many nights the lamp had stood there, doing its job patiently, never asking for praise. How many people had walked under it, carrying their own evenings, their own thoughts. The lamp was a modest star tethered to the earth, and tonight it made the town feel even safer. As he moved on, he felt the scarf's warmth again, as if remembering it. He tucked his chin deeper, brush his cheek. The sensation was cozy and grounding. The scarf was not just warmth, it was a boundary between him and the cool air, a friendly companion he could adjust whenever he needed. He imagined briefly taking it off at home and hanging it by the door, where it would keep the faint smell of night and rain, ready for another walk. A window on the next house glowed softly, and through the curtain he could see the shadow of a plant, leaves large and calm. The plant's silhouette looked like a hand opening. The image gave him a gentle sense of welcome, even though it was not his house. The town was full of such silent gestures. He reached a small set of steps leading down into a slightly lower lane. Water ran along the edge, and the cobbles here were darker. He took the steps carefully, feeling the slight shift in balance, and then continued along the lane. The mist gathered more densely here, held by the lower ground. The street lamp ahead was almost completely haloed, its pole disappearing into the fog above the light. The lamp looked like it was holding up a small sun. As he approached, the light revealed tiny particles in the air, drizzle and mist catching the glow. They sparkled faintly, not like glitter, but like the air had been gently dusted with softness. He thought, with quiet amusement, that if someone wanted to describe this as magical, they could, and they wouldn't be wrong. But it wasn't magic that changed things. It was the kind that revealed what was already there. The beauty in moisture, in light, in slow movement. He walked into the circle, and the wet cobblestones gleamed in detail. He could see the small dips between stones filled with water, and in each dip the lamp's light was reflected as a thin line. The reflections trembled when his footstep sent a tiny vibration through the ground. It was as if the street itself responded to his presence, not dramatically, but gently, like a sleeping animal shifting its weight. That thought brought him comfort, not because he believed the street was literally alive, but because the feeling of being gently responded to is soothing. The town, through its lights and stones and quiet, seemed to say, yes, you are here, yes, you belong, yes, you can rest. He found himself breathing in time with his steps. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. The rhythm was natural and calming. The town's hush matched it. Even the drizzle seemed to keep pace, light enough not to interrupt. Another distant sound arrived, the faint, metallic ring of something small, perhaps a tram bell far away, or a bicycle bell, or a buoy again. It was so far that it felt almost like a memory of sound rather than sound itself. It hung in the mist for a second and then faded. The night did not cling to it. It let it go easily. He turned one more corner, and now he could see the street where his building stood. The lamps here were evenly spaced, and their halos overlapped more than on other streets, making the road look like a softly lit corridor. The buildings were modest, with small balconies and railings darkened by rain. Here and there, a potted plant sat on a balcony, its leaves heavy with droplets. The mist made every balcony light bloom. His gratitude deepened slightly, like a river becoming wider. He was nearly home, not in a way that made him rush, but in a way that made him feel gently held by anticipation. Home was warm. Home was familiar. Home would smell like clean fabric and perhaps a hint of tea. He could imagine taking off his shoes, hearing the quiet thump as they settled by the door. He could imagine the warm air inside, the soft light from a lamp, the comfortable silence. But for now, he was still outside, and the outside was also comforting. The town offered him this last stretch of walk as a kind of gift. He passed another set of quiet shop fronts, smaller than the ones near the square. A tailor's shop with a dark window and a measuring tape hanging like a pale ribbon. A small antique shop with old picture frames visible through the glass, their gold edges catching faint light. A florist's shop with the inside dim, but a single lamp left on near the back, illuminating empty buckets, and a counter that smelled faintly, even through the door, of green stems and clean water. He loved that these places existed, even when closed. They were part of the town's body, resting at night the way people rested. Their silence was not absence. It was sleep. The mist shifted, and for a moment the air cleared just slightly. He could see farther down the street, see the repeating pattern of lamps, see the wet road gleaming in segments. Then the mist drifted back in, and the distance softened again. It felt like the town was breathing inhale, exhale, opening and closing its view in time with the night. He smiled again, subtle and private. The thought of the town breathing was soothing. If the town breathed, then he could breathe with it. The rhythm of his steps and breath already matched the quiet pulse of the streetlights and drizzle. He reached his building's gate, a familiar iron one with a latch that clicked in a certain touched it, and it was cold and slick with moisture. The metal's chill traveled into his fingertips and then faded, leaving behind the awareness of sensation. He opened the gate softly so it wouldn't make noise. It swung inward with a gentle sigh and then stopped, as if it too knew the hour and wished to be considerate. Inside the small courtyard, the air was a little less misty, held by walls on all sides. A single lamp above the entrance cast a warm pool of light onto the wet stones. The courtyard smelled of damp brick and a faint trace of plants, maybe a small shrub near the corner, maybe ivy on the far wall. The drizzle sounded quieter here, filtered by the surrounding buildings. The world felt even more intimate. He stepped in and let the gate close behind him, again softly. The sound was final in the most comforting way, like placing a book gently back on a shelf. He took a moment to stand under the courtyard lamp. The light made his coat shine in places, and droplets on his sleeves glittered faintly. The scarf at his neck looked softer and warmer in this glow. He felt an urge to look up. Above the courtyard, the sky was still dark and clouded, but the mist was thinner here, and he could see the faint outline of rooftops. No stars tonight, but that was fine. The night did not need stars to be beautiful. Lamps were enough, and the mist was enough, and the steady quiet was more than enough. He listened. From somewhere inside the building, a very faint sound, perhaps water moving in a pipe, perhaps a floorboard settling, offered a subtle reminder that the building, like the town, was alive in the simplest way. Not alive with intention, but alive with warmth and structure and history. He liked that. He liked feeling that he was entering not a silent box, but a place with its own gentle, steady presence. He wiped his shoes lightly on the mat by the entrance, not because he had to, but because the small ritual felt grounding. Then he reached for the door handle. It was cooler than the air inside would be, but it was familiar. His hand fitted the way a key fits its lock. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The change in air was immediate, warmer, drier, softly scented with old wood and faint soap. The hallway light was dim, not glaring. It made the walls glow a muted cream, and the floor tiles reflected a small patch of light near the entrance. The outside sounds, the drizzle, the distant bell became a memory as the door closed gently behind him. He stood for a moment and let the warmth settle on him. He unwound his scarf slowly, the wool sliding against his coat, and he held it in his hands for a second. It was still warm from his body and slightly cool at the ends where it had met the mist. The scarf smelled faintly of rain now, and the scent was pleasant. It was the scent of having been outside and returning safely in. He climbed the stairs unhurriedly. The building's stairwell was quiet, but not empty of character. The steps were worn slightly in the center from years of use, and the railing was smooth where countless hands had touched it. The air carried a faint smell of paper, perhaps from someone's mail or books behind a door, and a hint of cooking from earlier in the evening, now faded into a soft background note. These were the gentle signatures of other lives, calm and normal. At his landing, he paused at the window that looked out onto the street. The glass was slightly fogged at the edges from the difference in temperature. He wiped a small, clear patch with his fingertip and looked out. The street below was a ribbon of wet cobblestone, shining softly. The street lamps stood like patient guardians, each surrounded by its halo of mist. The drizzle was lighter now, almost nothing, but the air remained thick with fog. He could see the circles of light on the road, the way they overlapped, and how the cobbles held those circles like bowls holding warm soup. He could see the faint shimmer of reflections where water had pooled. He watched for a moment, feeling the calm he'd carried all evening settle even more deeply. From this height, the town looked like a quiet dream. Not unreal, just softened, like something remembered with affection. He could imagine, if he wanted to, that the town was a kind presence watching over its sleeping houses, breathing with them, keeping the lamps lit and the streets gentle. It was a comforting thought, and it did not need proof. It was enough that it felt true in the way warmth feels true. He turned away from the window and continued up to his door. The hallway lights were spaced so that no corner was harshly lit, no shadow too deep. Everything was balanced. He found his keys easily, their familiar shape resting in his pocket. The metal was cool against his fingertips, and the slight clink was quiet, absorbed by the hallway's soft acoustics. He unlocked his door and stepped inside. Home greeted him with warmth and stillness. The air was slightly scented with the clean, neutral smell of his space, fabric, wood, perhaps a hint of tea from earlier. The rooms were dark, except for the faint light from the street slipping through a curtain and a small lamp he turned on near the entry. The lamp's glow was gentle, and it made everything look calm and soft-edged, like the streetlights outside. He closed the door behind him and stood for a second, letting the feeling of being home settle fully. It was not a dramatic relief. It was a steady, grateful recognition. This is my place. I am safe here. I can rest. He hung his coat and scarf carefully. The scarf looked plush and content on its hook, as if it too was glad to be inside. He slipped off his shoes and set them neatly. The floor under his socks was cool at first, then warmed quickly. Each small action was a quiet punctuation mark, ending the sentence of the day. He walked to the window in his living room and pulled the curtain aside just a little. Outside, the mist still moved in slow currents. The nearest street lamp cast its glow onto the wet pavement, and the circle of light looked almost like a living thing, gently pulsing, not actually changing, but seeming to, because mist drifted through it like breath through a lantern. The street was empty of hurried movement. If someone walked by now, they would be unhurried, wrapped in their own scarf, carrying their own calm. He listened from inside. The sound of drizzle was barely there now, just an occasional tiny tick against the window. Far away, the bell chimed again, one soft note, then another. It was so distant it felt like a lullaby for the town itself. He imagined the sound traveling through the fog, sliding along rooftops, settling on cobblestones, slipping into courtyards, finding its way into rooms where people slept. The bell did not command. It comforted. He let the curtain fall back into place and turned away from the window. The lamp's light made the room feel like a nest. The furniture sat quietly, familiar shapes that asked nothing of him. A book lay where he'd left it, a mug in the sink waiting without judgment, a blanket folded on the couch with the soft promise of warmth. Home, like the town, had a benevolent presence, not a spirit, not a voice, simply the accumulated kindness of everyday care. He moved slowly, savoring the unhurriedness. In the kitchen, he poured himself a small glass of water, the sound of it filling the glass clear and gentle. He drank, feeling the coolness, and then set the glass down softly. He washed his hands, the warm water soothing his skin, and the soap's mild scent rose briefly, clean and calming. The small rituals were like stepping stones across the last stretch of wakefulness. He turned off unnecessary lights, leaving only the lamp. The shadows in the room deepened, but they were friendly shadows, softened by the lamp's warm glow. He sat for a moment, not doing anything, simply being. He noticed his breath again, slow and steady. He noticed the quiet hum of the building, so faint it was almost imagination. He noticed the way his body felt, a pleasant heaviness in his limbs, the gentle warmth at his neck where the scarf had been, the calm satisfaction in his chest. In his mind, the town outside continued to exist in its soft, misty beauty. The street lamps still shone through fog. The wet cobblestones still held circles of light like open hands. The distant bell still marked time without rushing it. The town's presence, this sense of kind companionship, felt like a blanket spread over roofs and streets, keeping everything safe. He stood and walked toward his bedroom. The hallway in his apartment was dim. The floorboards made the faintest creak, a familiar sound. He opened the bedroom door and let the lamp's light spill in just enough to soften the darkness. The bed waited, smooth and inviting. The air in the room was cool enough to be refreshing, warm enough to be comfortable. He pulled back the covers and felt the soft fabric brush his fingers. He changed into something comfortable, moving slowly, as if each motion was a way of telling his body, "You can rest now." He climbed into bed and pulled the blanket up. The warmth gathered around him quickly. He adjusted the pillow and let his head sink into it, the mattress supporting him with steady kindness. He lay on his back for a moment and pictured the town once more, the narrow lanes, the quiet shop windows, the river's dark ribbon-reflecting lamplight, the park's bare trees drawn in gold against fog, the gentle drizzle, and the smell of rain on stone. He pictured his own walk, his steps muffled on wet cobbles, his scarf warm against his neck, the circles of light on the ground, the distant chime drifting and fading. And then, as naturally as breathing, the images began to slow. The street lamps' halos blurred into softness. The mist became a gentle, pale wash. The cobblestones' reflections became a calm shimmer, then a quiet glow. The town's presence remained, but it did not press itself into focus. It simply stayed nearby, like a trusted friend sitting in the next room, reading quietly while you fall asleep. He inhaled, and in his mind the air still carried the scent of rain, clean, mineral, comforting. He exhaled, and the last tightness of the day left his body as if it had been waiting for permission. The town outside breathed in its slow rhythm, and he breathed with it. In, out, in, out. Somewhere beyond his walls, the bell would chime again at its own pace, softened by fog. The street lamps would continue their patient glow. The mist would drift, and drizzle would come and go like a gentle whisper. Nothing would demand anything. Everything would simply be. His thoughts, once like a room with many doors, became a hallway with one soft light at the end. He followed it without effort. The gratitude in his chest did not need words. It was a steady warmth, like the scarf had been, now replaced by the blanket and the bed and the quiet. The town held its calm around him. The night held its softness. And sleep, when it arrived, would be just another gentle thing, like stepping from one circle of lamplight into the next, and finding each time that the ground beneath you is warm with reflected glow, and quietly, kindly sure.